Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest monologue. Today's is what I call a public service monologue because it it's um, it's an attempt to sort of break down for people what's going on with wildlife legislation because there's a draft wildlife bill 2025 that is currently in public participation phase. And this being my area of expertise, this wildlife policy being my area of expertise, I'd like to give my contribution to that. First of all, on the issue of public participation, I do not engage in the nonsense of government of Kenya public participation, particularly in the wildlife sector. I don't know about other sectors, but my experience in the wildlife sector is that it's fraudulent. And why I say this is because back in must have been 2014 or 2015 when they were building the standard gauge railway across Nairobi National Park. I was part of a group that vehemently opposed that sort of defiling of the park in that manner. And we gathered and decided to speak up against it. So I went to a public participation meeting put together by the project implementers. It was held in a place called Karinde, south of between Karen and Togoto. And went to the public participation meeting. And the first thing that struck me was that the environmental impact assessment EIA chief EIA officer from Kenya Wildlife Service, Mr. Bernard Carrier, was there representing not KWS but the developer. And then they took down our names as we entered the meeting. We gave our opinions against it, and later on I saw my name amongst those experts who were consulted and purportedly gave the project a clean bill of health. So I won't let myself be used like that again. But here's my contribution, and those of you who are connected, who are in the wildlife sector, who know those in authorities, feel free to tag them so they can see this. Um, Again, going back into history, it must have been around 2008. There was some proposed amendments to the wildlife bill, and this was under the old constitution, under the Mwai Kibaki administration, where there were some proposed amendments and the discussions around them were paid for by donors or wealthy philanthropists. The person driving it in parliament was the late Gigi Karaoke, was then the MP for Laikipia West. There was a lot of fluff in the bill. We are increasing compensation amounts. We are broadening the compensation brackets as per species. A lot of things to make it look good, but only one thing was important there, and it was hidden under all this. It was consumptive use of wildlife, reintroduction of shooting of wildlife for fun, sport hunting, obviously under the guise of consumptive use and culling and all these other rubbish words that conservationists use to justify sort of bloodlust and killing of wildlife. And the finances were paid, the donors paid bribes, parliamentarians were bribed and taken on a 2 week long benchmarking tour of southern Kenya to see how well sport hunting works there. When they came back, they passed it even after hours. It was passed in late in the evening hours, and they passed it. The only thing that saved us then was the old constitution, because then the president had to assent to it for it to become law. And someone got to the president and told him, like, these guys want to introduce sport hunting. All this other stuff is rubbish. Told him the truth, basically. So the late President Kibaki, to his credit, sort of sat on this thing for some time and then just gave his answer, just said no. And that's what saved us from having sport hunting back under the old constitution. Anyway, fast forward to now. I've read through the draft wildlife bill 2025, and even by Kenya's low intellectual standards, it's one of the most stupid bits of proposed legislation I've ever seen, even to my non-legal expert mind. But again, it's the things that are not said that are important here, and this is where I want us to look at this thing carefully. First of all, there's still Kenya Wildlife Services there, but it is been stripped, even further stripped than how stripped it is now, of its powers and authorities, and its capabilities. And I say Kenya Wildlife Service is no longer fit for purpose. It should be completely disbanded and reformed, because they are standing by and watching their powers be given away, their authorities be given away, and not to other branches. Right now, they're not being given away to other departments in our country. These powers are being given away to NGOs, and NGOs which exist in this country. Wildlife NGOs exist in this country to advance the purposes or needs of their foreign donors. That's all they do, and that's why they're all headed by former KWS people who are insiders and know how to corrupt the system. You look at the head of Nature Conservancy, look at the head of I4, look at the head of even ACC. These are all former KWS senior officers. But then back to the bill. Again, a lot of fluff in there and a lot of noise. And the first thing I noticed is, okay, KWS being stripped of a lot of its powers. But that's not surprising, because they've made themselves like home guards. If you look like home guards under the colonial system, they were not considered intellectual beings. They were to follow orders, and they were not asked anything, and they never asked any questions. So, yeah, they are getting their just desserts and losing out. The only sad thing is that we are left sort of adrift as people. Who holds our wildlife in trust when Kenya Wildlife Service has so willingly abdicated its position of authority in this thing, right? That's a question. Then the other thing, there's a move to create a wildlife research and training institute to be in charge of wildlife research. These are basically hived off. It's like KWS Training Institute in Naivasha, which has been hived off. This is a lacuna. KWS has not had any research agenda for years, decades maybe. Anyone calling himself or herself a research scientist under KWS is mtu wa mkono, or as field assistant for a foreign research interest. KWS has no research interest of its own. They don't have any policy ideas that they want to do research and find out how they can advance, or they don't have policy that can even be advised by that research. So they've just been gatekeepers and looking to see how much money they can get out of the foreign researchers, and that's why they restricted themselves to licensing and permitting, and otherwise extorting money from foreign researchers. And these foreign researchers, some have good agendas, some don't, but you can be sure that once they've been extorted and paid what they paid KWS and KWS officers what they need to pay, there are certainly laws, and they become laws unto themselves. They are free to pursue whatever agenda it is they want to pursue. And this is an intellectual failing in Kenya. Recently, some people were arrested at Jomo Kenyatta Airport carrying a lot of vials of ants, some ants specimens, live ant specimens. And if you looked at the whole legal proceedings, it was like a popular program which was popular in my youth called Vioja Mahakamani, clowning in legal circles. First of all, someone decided that the ants were worth 1 million or something. I don't know how you decide what the value of ants. And yeah, exporting ants without a permit, which is true. The permit is just a question of paying. If these guys had paid, no one would bother them. But then the key question in all these discussions, there was no expertise brought in to find out what species of ants are they, where were they collected, and what was the purpose they were collected for. When someone collects, you don't just say, oh, where's the permit for these ants? And they, oh, I don't know. Why were they collecting those ants? Where were those guys from? Who sent them? Those are the questions. But our natural resource sector is so intellectually stunted, even by our low Kenyan standards. We are dumb as posts in terms of our natural heritage. It's so intellectually stunted that they don't seek to find out these things. In fact, those two, I think they are Belgian men, young Belgian men, were just idiots. They should have just paid. No one would have asked them. Pay per diem to an officer and even having him accompany you to collect the ants, and you'd have gotten away with it. That's where we are. Now back to the bill. It has created a strange new creature called Wildlife Regulatory Authority, proposed, WRA. If you look at the list of powers and duties of this authority, it's extensive. It has usurped most of what KWS was doing, and is also duplicating some of what KWS will still be doing. So one of the things, like formulating standards for wildlife conservation, then regulating fees at wildlife conservation facilities. Some of these are private conservancies. You are not going to tell Olpejeta, for example, what to charge at their gate. It's a privately owned facility, privately owned land, and various other places are as well, and which is very strange. Then there's one of the funny things is written there is that they're to regulate and maintain a register of wildlife conservation experts. No. That one will not fly. There will not be a Kenya government office to tell Mordecai Ogada whether or not his 25 or so years experience in conservation policy qualifies him as an expert. No. And I can bet there will be nobody in that authority who is my peer in my area of expertise. So that's ridiculous. They're trying to keep people who are not coming from an intellectual background cannot purport to gatekeep intellectual work in any field. But the key thing amongst all these powers, one of them is the composition of the board, and they first of all, it's a board that is very heavy on government officials. It has alternates from the PS. It has the Inspector General of Police and his representative. It has other people from the administration and all that. So it's very administrative and power heavy. Kenya government state power. That there is shows you the weight it's been given. Then you go. Then I kept looking. So what's the hidden thing? What's the hidden thing in this authority that will have power to regulate everything, including they have power to even allow consumptive use, whatever, if they deem it fit, or pass it at their board. Then I found it at the bottom of part 3. The regulatory authority is allowed by law to receive gifts and grants. So that authority will not be ours. And I'd like to look at other regulatory authorities in Kenya. Look at Kenya Bureau of Standards. Look at maybe the Liquor Licensing Board. Look at Tourism Regulatory Authority. Those kind of things. NTSA. If they're allowed to receive gifts and grants, how will they regulate the person who gives them grants? Or you can just go and give the Liquor Licensing Board. Let's say the Liquor Licensing Board can receive a grant from Diageo or EABL or Keroche Breweries. or that NACADA or whatever the tobacco licensing board can receive gifts and grants from BAT or Philip Morris, then Philip Morris will run the thing. Then EABL or Diageo will run the thing, right? So if we have this very powerful authority, with the board that even includes Inspector General of Police, then it can receive grants. Bill Gates, Bezos, or anybody, that regulatory authority is putting up Kenya's wildlife sector for sale. It is doing the thing, the very thing that Richard Leakey and Harold Workman failed to do in the early 2000s, and that got him fired by the late Newton Kulund, who was then the minister. They wanted to put up a wildlife sector for sale, and they had buyers ready. Now it's being done through law. This is how you can tell that this whole process of drafting this legislation is donor funded. It is funded by the people who want to buy it. And because those of us in this sector, the Kenyans in this sector, are so dumb, so hollow, so morally bereft of any substance, we took the per diem, attended the meetings, and drafted this thing. And now we are bringing this filth before the Kenyan citizenry to do public participation. Don't do it. If anyone goes to those public participation meetings, go there and stand up, and the only thing you should say is throw this in the dustbin where it belongs. Right now we have conservation NGOs convening meetings and caucuses to sort of develop common positions on this. No, those guys have nothing to contribute. Those conservation NGOs, they're just convening caucuses to see where we can eat. There's a big carcass about to be felled. Can we get the hooves or the ears or a piece of liver? There's a colony being formed. Can we get home guard positions? That's what these NGOs are trying, the KWC and all these others. That's what they're trying. This thing is being this it's like a truck has fallen, has overturned on a roadside, and they're running to come and siphon petrol or take bundles of unga, depending on what the truck was carrying. So this thing is a train wreck, as the Americans would say. It's rubbish. We need to reject it in toto. And first of all, then our county governments, if they can get their minds in order, particularly those counties with wildlife. I'm talking like Ipia, Kajiado, Baringo, Samburu, Marsabit, all of those ones, Narok. If they can get their brains in order, we must push for devolution of wildlife conservation so that County X, Kakamega County, can manage Kakamega Forest. Trans Nzoia County can manage Mount Elgon National Park, can manage Saiwa Swamp National Park, etc., etc. Because right now, our wildlife sector is being devolved to foreigners and their agents who sit in Kenya pretending to care about this. So, county government, get your act together and step up for once in the life. County governments have since 2010 have proved to be, it's been 15 years now. You can't still be so useless intellectually. Step up and let's get something in place that will hold something for our people. We will end up at a point where Kenyans will be squatters in this country because county governments haven't embraced their position in the devolved system, and they have not stood up for themselves and by extension for the people. And those at the center are busy selling Kenya. I mean, Kenya is being sold. It's amazing to me how badly do the people in national government hate Kenyans, that they're selling everything that we own. What will be left for us and our children? Let's think about that. So in the meantime, look at the wildlife bill, treat it with the contempt it deserves, and reject it in toto. Otherwise, you are just one of the home guards as the colonialists are coming.